My name is Evelyn. I'm 48 years old, and by any objective measure, I am a success. I am the founder and CEO of a top-tier cybersecurity firm that I built from my garage with 2 maxed-out credit cards and a faith in myself that bordered on insanity. My company protects the digital assets of global corporations. I am decisive, respected, and I am very, very wealthy. But success is a strange, multifaceted prism. In the boardroom, I am a titan. In the world of finance, I am a force. But in the ecosystem of my own family, in the heart of my own home, I was nothing more than a utility. For a decade, I was a walking, breathing ATM, a provider of funds so reliable, so silent, that I had ceased to be a person. I had become a function, an endless resource to be drained. And to my only daughter, Chloe, the person I loved more than the company I built, or the air I breathed, I was, in the end, a beggar. A beggar to be thrown out of the very palace I had paid for. This isn't a story about money, not really. It's about the slow, creeping erosion of the soul that happens when love is transactional, and you are the only one paying the price. It began, as these things so often do, with a divorce. My ex-husband, Mark, was charming, charismatic, and allergic to responsibility. While I was coding through the night, building our future, he was building a network of friends at the local country club. He called it networking, I called it golf. When I finally found the courage to leave the marriage, he painted me as the cold, career-obsessed villain. Our daughter, Chloe, was only 8, and she believed him. It was easier to. He was the fun parent, the one who bought ice cream for dinner and never checked her homework. I was the one who enforced bedtimes, who insisted on vegetables, who was always tired from 12-hour workdays. I was the anchor, and he was the sail, and to a child, a sail is so much more exciting. The guilt was an ocean, and I drowned in it every single day. The guilt of the broken home. The guilt of my ambition. The guilt of my exhaustion. So, I started to compensate in the only way I knew how. I paid. I paid for everything. I see now that I wasn't just paying for her life, I was paying penance for my own. The child support and alimony stipulated by the court were a pittance compared to what I actually gave him. Mark never worked another day. He became a full-time consultant on living well, with me as his sole client. He and Chloe stayed in the large family home, the one with the pool and the sprawling garden. It was in my name, of course. I paid the mortgage, the taxes, the utilities. I moved into a sleek, minimalist apartment downtown, closer to my office. It was a practical choice, I told myself. A smart business decision. But the truth is, I felt like a visitor in my own daughter's life, and it was easier to live in a place that reflected that reality. The flashbacks come unbidden, sharp and clear like shards of glass. Chloe, at 10, wanting a pony. Mark called me, laughing. You know how she is, Evie. She has her heart set on it, he framed it as a charming childhood whim. I saw the logistics, the cost, the responsibility. But when I hesitated, the phone was passed to Chloe. Mommy, please. Daddy says you can afford it. Don't you love me? What do you do with a question like that? You buy the pony. You pay for the stabling, the lessons, the vet bills. And you watch from a distance as your daughter and your ex-husband post smiling pictures on social media, #hashtag best dad ever. You are not in the pictures. You are just the unseen engine making it all possible. Then it was the designer clothes in high school. The trips to Europe for cultural enrichment. Her first car wasn't a sensible use sedan, it was a brand new convertible, the one all her friends envied. Each request was presented by Mark as essential for Chloe's social standing and happiness. Each hesitation from me was met with a carefully orchestrated wave of guilt and emotional blackmail from them both. Evelyn, you don't want her to feel left out, do you? Mark would say, his voice laced with false concern. All her friends have it. The implication was always clear: your ambition, your success, your choices have damaged this child. The least you can do is pay to smooth over the cracks. And for a long time, I believed it. I kept meticulous records of every expense. At first, it was just the habit of a disciplined business owner. I tracked cash flow in my company. I tracked it in my personal life. But over time, the spreadsheets became something else. They became a silent testament. A ledger of my sacrifice. I never looked at the grand total. I was afraid to. It was a Pandora's box of my own making, and I feared what would happen if I ever opened it. I just kept working, kept building my company, kept sending the money. I held on to the foolish, desperate hope that one day, Chloe would grow up. She would see beyond the surface. She would look past the fun dad and the endless gifts and see the mother who worked herself to the bone to give her everything. I thought that eventually, my love, demonstrated through years of silent, unwavering support, would finally be recognized. I was wrong. It wasn't recognized. It was merely expected. And the bigger my success grew, the larger their expectations became, culminating in a celebration so extravagant, so utterly decadent, that it finally snapped the chains of guilt that had bound me for a decade. Chloe was turning 21. It was a milestone, and in the world she and Mark had constructed, a milestone demanded a monument. A week before her birthday, they summoned me to the house, my house, for a planning session. I walked into the living room, and it felt like a corporate ambush. Chloe sat on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, while Mark stood before a large easel, like a general outlining a battle plan. On it were photos of venues, floral arrangements, and catering spreads torn from glossy magazines. He tapped a picture of a celebrity DJ with a polished pointer. "So," he began, a broad smile on his face, "Chloe and I have put together a preliminary vision for the big day. We want it to be elegant, but still, you know, a vibe." He spoke as if he were pitching a startup, a venture funded by an invisible, infinitely generous investor. That investor, of course, was me. The list was breathtaking in its audacity. A converted art gallery downtown. A caterer known for their Michelin star chef. A guest list of over 200 people, most of whom I didn't know. And, of course, the celebrity DJ, who apparently charged more per hour than my top security analyst. I listened in stunned silence, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Finally, Mark clicked a pen and wrote a number at the bottom of the board. My eyes locked onto it. $70,000. A small, dry laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. 70,000. I asked, my voice thin. Mark, that's not a party, that's a down payment on a house. Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed in annoyance, as if I'd just said something vulgar. Mom, don't be so dramatic, she sighed. It's my 21st. It's supposed to be special. All of my friends are having huge parties. Madison's dad flew her entire sorority to Cabo. Mark placed a paternal hand on her shoulder. Your mother's right to be careful, honey, he said, the words a performance of reason, but his tone was pure manipulation. But Evelyn, he turned to me, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper, we know what your company pulled in last quarter. This is a drop in the bucket for you. Don't you want to give her a memory she'll cherish forever? Think of what it will mean to her. Every word was a finely honed weapon. Drop in the bucket. Don't you want her to be happy? After everything. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. After you broke up our family. The guilt, my old and constant companion, rose up and choked me. I looked at my daughter's face, a perfect, unblemished portrait of youthful entitlement. I saw the hope in her eyes, not hope for a celebration of love, but hope for a spectacle. I wanted, so desperately, for this grand gesture to be the one. The one that would finally make her see me. Okay, I said, the word tasting like defeat. Okay. I'll do it. The relief on their faces was immediate and absolute. There was no gratitude, no thank you, Mom, just the quiet satisfaction of a request granted, an expectation met. The next day, I made the transfer. The party was a week later. I arrived alone. I had spent an hour choosing my outfit, a classic, elegant silk dress in a deep sapphire blue. I wanted to look beautiful for my daughter. I wanted to fit in. But the moment I stepped into the gallery, I knew I was an alien. The space was unrecognizable, transformed into a pulsing, neon-drenched nightclub. Young, beautiful people were everywhere, clutching cocktails and posing for selfies against a flower wall that spelled out Chloe's name in pink roses. The bass from the celebrity DJ's set vibrated through the floor, a frantic, joyless rhythm. I saw Mark across the room, holding court, a glass of champagne in his hand, accepting compliments on his party. He caught my eye and gave me a little salute, a smirk playing on his lips, before turning back to a group of his much younger admirers. I searched for Chloe. I found her in the center of a laughing, shouting circle of friends. She was radiant, glowing, the queen of her own little kingdom. I had brought a separate gift for her, something small and personal. It was a locket, a vintage piece I'd found that was identical to one my own grandmother had worn. Inside, I had placed a tiny photo of me holding her as a baby. I thought we could have a quiet moment, a real moment, amidst the chaos I had funded. I navigated through the crowd and touched her arm gently. "Chloe, honey?" She turned, and for a split second, her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "Oh? Hi, Mom, I just wanted to give you this," I said, holding out the small velvet box. "Happy birthday, my love." She didn't take it. She glanced at her friends, a look of acute embarrassment on her face. "Not now, Mom," she hissed, her voice low. "You're kind of killing the vibe. It'll only take a second," I pleaded softly. And that's when it happened. The final, fatal blow. Her face hardened, the youthful softness replaced by a cruel, dismissive glare I had only ever seen on her father. "Oh my God," she said, her voice rising in theatrical exasperation, for her friends to hear. "Can't you just see this isn't the time? Why do you have to be so needy? Just leave. Seriously. You look like some beggar who wandered in off the street. Go on, leave." She turned her back on me, and her friends giggled. The word echoed in the cavernous space, louder than the pounding music. Beggar? Me? The woman who had signed the $70,000 check. The woman whose name was on the lease for the gallery. The woman who had built the gilded cage they all partied in. A beggar. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break, it vaporized. It turned to dust and blew away on the synthetic wind of the fog machine. I stood there for a second, the velvet box still in my outstretched hand, completely invisible. Then, I turned around, and I walked out. I didn't say a word. I just left. The drive home was preternaturally silent. I had turned off the radio, and the only sound was the hushed hum of my car's engine, a stark contrast to the deafening throb of the party I had just fled. The city lights blurred into long, indistinct streaks of color through the tears that I refused to let fall. It wasn't sadness I felt. Sadness was a familiar territory, a land I had inhabited for years. This was something else entirely. It was a cold, terrifying, and utterly liberating clarity. The kind of clarity that comes after a high fever breaks. The world, which had been a fog of guilt and obligation, was suddenly in sharp, painful focus. The word beggar replayed in my mind, not as an insult, but as a diagnosis. I had been begging. I had been on my knees for a decade, begging for a scrap of affection, a nod of recognition, a crumb of respect from my own child. I had been begging her to love the real me, the tired, working, imperfect mother, and not the abstract concept of a bank account. And she had finally given me her answer. She had looked at my love, my sacrifice, my entire being, and she had told me to leave. I pulled into the garage of my downtown apartment building. I sat in the car for a long time, the engine off, in the concrete silence. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. These were the hands that had typed thousands of lines of code, signed million-dollar contracts, and tirelessly written checks to fund a life I wasn't even welcome in. A new feeling began to bloom in the void where the hurt had been. It was anger. A pure, clean, righteous anger. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a fight. It was the cold, calculated anger of a CEO who has just discovered a catastrophic breach in her own system. The system was my life. The breach was my family. And I was about to patch it. Permanently. I went upstairs, unlocked the door to my apartment, and walked straight to my home office. I didn't turn on the main lights, just the desk lamp, which cast a pool of focused light on my workstation. My movements were calm, deliberate. The time for emotion was over. This was now a matter of business. I powered on my laptop, the familiar chime echoing in the quiet room. And I opened the file. The one I hadn't dared to look at in its entirety. Family_expenses_masterxels. There it was. 10 years of my life, quantified in neat columns and unforgiving numbers. I started a new column on the far right. Total. I began to sum the rows. The mortgage payments on their 5-bedroom house, the property taxes, the landscaping, the pool maintenance. Total, over $1.2 million. The lease payments on Mark's luxury sedan and Chloe's convertible. Total, $180,000. Mark's supplemental alimony, the generous monthly stipend I gave him so he could maintain his lifestyle. Total, $1.8 million. Chloe's tuition at her elite private university, her sorority dues, her shopping allowances, her spring break trips. Total, $750,000. The miscellaneous column was a beast of its own. Country club memberships, 5-star vacations to Italy and Hawaii, Mark's angel investments in his friend's doomed restaurant ventures. It went on and on. Finally, I scrolled to the very bottom, to the last entry I had made just last week. Chloe 21st birthday party $70,000. I took a deep breath and I hit sum on the total column. The number that appeared on the screen made me gasp. It shimmered in the dim light, a monument to my own blindness. $4, 527, 48016. $4.5 million. I had given them a fortune. Enough to build a legacy, to start a foundation, to change the world for thousands. Instead, I had used it to build a shrine to entitlement, with 2 high priests who had come to see me as their goddess of infinite supply. I stared at the number until it was burned into my memory. Then I picked up the phone. My first call was to my best friend, Sarah. She picked up on the second ring. Evelyn? It's past midnight. Is everything okay? I told her what happened. All of it. When I finished, there was a long pause on the line. Then she said, her voice fierce with a decade of pent-up frustration on my behalf, "Good. I'm glad it happened. It's about damn time you woke up. What are you going to do?" "I'm doing it," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "I'm cutting the cord." My next call was to David Young, my corporate lawyer. He was ruthless, brilliant, and utterly devoid of sentimentality. He answered his private line with a gruff, "This better be important, David," I said, my voice steady. "It's Evelyn. I need you to draw up 2 eviction notices for the property on Oakwood Lane. I want them delivered by courier tomorrow morning. I also need you to draft letters to terminate all my personal credit card authorizations and cancel all direct transfers to Mark and Chloe." And finally, I want to restructure my will. And set up a new trust. A very, very specific 1 inch. There was a pause. I could almost hear him smiling. With pleasure, Evelyn, he said. With absolute pleasure. When I hung up the phone, I felt lighter. The weight of $4.5 million, and the 10 years of guilt that came with it, had finally been lifted. I was no longer a beggar. I was the queen, taking back her kingdom. And judgment was coming. The first ripple of the earthquake I had started came 24 hours later. It was a text from Mark. My card was just declined at the pro shop. Embarrassing. Fix it. I read the message, a dry, bitter smile touching my lips. I archived the conversation without replying. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Chloe. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a masterpiece of aggrieved privilege. Mom, seriously? My card isn't working. I was trying to buy the new bag we saw last week, and it was declined. I have to go to Ashley's brunch tomorrow, and I have nothing to wear. This is so annoying. Call me back. I deleted the voicemail. The real storm broke the next morning. It was a Saturday. I was in my office, sipping coffee and reviewing quarterly reports, when my assistant buzzed me through the intercom, her voice trembling slightly. Evelyn. Mark and Chloe are here. They don't have an appointment, but they are. They're insisting. Let them in, Jessica, I said calmly. And please, hold all my calls. The door to my office flew open with a force that made the glass rattle in its frame. Mark stormed in first, his face a mottled, furious red. Chloe trailed behind him, her eyes wide and already brimming with tears. It was a classic good cop, bad cop routine, and I wasn't buying a ticket. What is the meaning of this? Mark bellowed, slamming a crumpled envelope down on my polished mahogany desk. It was the eviction notice. You're kicking us out of our home. Is this some kind of sick, menopausal joke? Chloe rushed forward, her face a mask of practiced distress. Mom, how could you? After everything we've been through. I know I said something stupid at the party. I was drunk, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. But this? She gestured wildly, as if to encompass the injustice of it all. This is insane. I took a slow sip of my coffee, my heart beating a steady, resolute rhythm. I let the silence hang in the air, letting their initial volley of fury and fake remorse dissipate into nothing. I looked from his enraged face to her tear-streaked one, and I felt nothing but a profound, chilling detachment. I swiveled in my chair and gestured to the large, 70-inch monitor on the wall behind me. With a click of my mouse, I brought up the spreadsheet. Family_expenses_masterxels. The final, damning number was displayed in a font size so large it was impossible to ignore. $4,527,48016. This is not a joke, I said, my voice even and low, cutting through their drama like a surgeon's scalpel. And it's not about your stupid comment at the party. That was not a mistake. That was a moment of honesty. It was merely the invoice for a 10-year education in what you truly think of me. This, I gestured to the screen, is an audit of my business. And you too have been my most unprofitable investment. I picked up a laser pointer from my desk and stood up, walking calmly towards the screen. I began to break it down for them, my voice the same dispassionate tone I used in board meetings when explaining a failed initiative. The house, Mark. The house you call our home has been paid for, maintained, and taxed exclusively by me for 10 years. It is not your home. It is my asset. An asset I am now liquidating. I clicked to the next slide, a breakdown of his supplemental alimony, this $1.8 million. This was not court-ordered. This was my guilt, which you so skillfully weaponized, allowing you to live a life of leisure while I worked 80-hour weeks. The funding for that lifestyle has now been discontinued. I moved to Chloe. Your education, your car, your clothes, your travels. I was happy to provide them when I believed I was investing in my daughter's future. But I have come to realize I was merely funding the social calendar of a stranger. The tears on Chloe's face were real now, born of panic, not performance. Mom, you can't do this. We're family. You're supposed to take care of us. It's what families do. Yes, I agreed, turning to face them. Families are supposed to care for each other. To respect each other. To love each other. When was the last time you asked me how my company was doing? When was the last time you asked me if I was tired? Or happy? Or lonely? For 10 years, every conversation has been a transaction, initiated by you, to request a withdrawal from me. Mark stepped forward, his tone shifting from rage to condescending reason. Evelyn, be sensible. You have more money than you know what to do with. You won't even miss it. This is just petty. You're being selfish. The word hung in the air. The final, desperate shot from their arsenal of manipulation. I almost laughed. Selfish, I repeated, savoring the irony. After giving you $4.5 million, I am selfish for wanting to keep what is mine. After being called a beggar at a $70,000 party I paid for, I am selfish for wanting a shred of dignity. You are right about one thing. I am being selfish. I am finally choosing to be selfish with my money, my time, my energy, and my life. Because I have finally realized that no one else in this room was ever going to do it for me, I walked back to my desk and pressed the intercom button. Jessica, could you please send in security? Mr. Williams and his daughter are leaving, their faces crumpled. The rage, the tears, the manipulation, it all dissolved into raw, undiluted panic. They saw it in my eyes. The finality. The end of the world as they knew it. You can't do this. Chloe sobbed, a genuine, desperate cry. Where will we go? What will we do? I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, broken, entitled daughter, and for the first time, I didn't give her the answer she wanted. I gave her the one she needed. That, I said, my voice devoid of malice, but full of conviction, is no longer my problem to solve. My lawyer, David Young, will handle all future communication. Goodbye. Security arrived, 2 large, impassive men, and escorted them out of my office. As the door clicked shut, I sank back into my chair, the silence of the room a comforting blanket. The Bank of Mom was officially, and permanently, closed for business. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm of logistics. David, my lawyer, was brutally efficient. The house was put on the market and sold within a month for a significant profit. The luxury cars were returned to the leasing agency. Every financial tie was severed with surgical precision. Mark and Chloe, as predicted, did not go quietly. I was bombarded with voicemails, emails, and texts, a frantic symphony of alternating rage, pleading, and threats of legal action, which David assured me were baseless. I never responded. I had set a boundary of steel, and I was not going to let them cross it. My friend Sarah became my firewall, my chosen family. She would screen the messages, giving me only the necessary updates, filtering out the venom. Mark is threatening to go to the press, she'd report, rolling her eyes. He says he'll tell everyone what a heartless monster you are. Let him, I'd reply, feeling a strange sense of peace. The truth is in the numbers. And I have the receipts. The fallout for them was swift and severe. Stripped of their unearned wealth, their world collapsed. Mark, a man in his early 50s with a decade-long gap on his resume filled only with golf scores and vacation photos, discovered he was unemployable in any meaningful capacity. His country club friends, who had so enjoyed his company when the champagne was flowing on my dime, suddenly had no time for him. He and Chloe were forced to move into a small, two-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the other side of town. The shock to their system was profound. Chloe had to drop out of her prestigious university. The tuition was no longer paid, and her grades weren't good enough for a scholarship. She got a job as a barista at a coffee shop near their new apartment. For the first time in her life, she had to wake up to an alarm clock, put on a uniform, and serve people who were often rude and demanding. For the first time, she had to earn her own money. While their world was shrinking, mine was expanding. I sold my sterile downtown apartment and bought a house by the ocean, an hour's drive from the city. It wasn't a mansion, but a beautiful, light-filled home with a wide porch and a garden I could tend to myself. I started painting again, a passion I had abandoned in college to focus on my career. I filled my new home with color and life. I traveled not for business, but for pleasure. I saw the ruins of Rome and the sun rise over the Serengeti. I found joy not in acquisition, but in experience. I was healing. I was building a new life, a chosen life, on a foundation of self-respect. About a year after the cutoff, a letter arrived. It was addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately as Chloe's. My first instinct was to throw it away, to protect the peace I had fought so hard to win. But curiosity, and perhaps a lingering flicker of maternal instinct, made me open it. The letter was not what I expected. There were no demands, no accusations, no self-pity. It was just an apology. A real one. She wrote about her life now. About the exhaustion of working a double shift to pay the rent. About the humility of having to budget for groceries. She wrote about watching her father, Mark, who had descended into a bitter, resentful state, blaming me for all his problems, refusing to take any responsibility for his own life. Living this way, she wrote, has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's made me realize that this is the world you shielded me from my entire life. I never understood what you did. I never saw the work, only the results. I took your strength and called it an obligation. I took your generosity and called it my birthright. When I called you a beggar that night, it was the cruelest, most ignorant thing I have ever said. Because I was the beggar, Mom. I was the one begging for things I hadn't earned, and I was too blind and spoiled to even see it. I don't expect you to forgive me. And I am not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. And I am sorry, I put the letter down, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. There was no triumph, no gloating, I told you so, there was just a deep, aching sadness for the years we had lost, and a quiet vindication for the choice I had made. The relationship we had was gone forever. It had been built on a lie, and it had to be demolished. But as I read her words, for the first time, I felt the possibility that we could build something new in its place. Something small, perhaps, and fragile. But something real. I decided I would agree to meet her for coffee. Not in a fancy cafe, but in the little shop where she worked. It would be on my terms. All of it would be on my terms, from now on. Evelyn reclaimed her life. She was no longer a function, no longer a utility to be exploited. She learned that family is not a bond of obligation to be endured, but a covenant of mutual respect to be earned. Her story serves as a powerful, and sometimes painful, reminder that enabling entitlement does not cultivate love, it breeds a quiet, insidious contempt. True value is not measured in the dollars you give away, but in the dignity you refuse to surrender. By closing the door on a life of thankless sacrifice, she finally opened the door to her own happiness. A happiness built not with money, but with the priceless currency of self-worth. What would you have done in Evelyn's position? Is there a point where financial support crosses the line into emotional self-harm? We invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.